atheists that are naturalists. We know that they stand where they stand on that. And it's even led to people like, I didn't want to go looking for the clip, but I know I've heard Matt Dillahunty say before about this. Like he'll say, so if it's not in the physical universe, it's not real. So you're saying it exists, like God exists, but he's not real? No, we think God exists and he's real. He's just not physical, right? That's the point.
Well, I don't think it's possible for something non-physical to exist. And in this response video to Trinity Radio, I hope to explain why in an understandable way. I say a response video, but it's more of a jumping off point for explaining my reasoning. So with that said, let's get going. Oh, and hi, my name's Joseph.
It's so surprised that naturalistic atheists believe ultimately matter is all there is. Now they're going to want to caveat that, but the truth is they believe that physical stuff, space, time, physical matter, that's all that exists. And anything immaterial that you want to describe as immaterial just comes off of that physical stuff.
Now, I do think that is a pretty good description of materialism, but as you said, I do want to caveat it. But I want to let you get to the point of your video first.
But it might surprise you to know, some of you may not know, that Mormons actually share this hardcore materialism with atheists.
Do they now?
That came out clearly in the debate last night with Vocab Malone.
Well, I guess I'd like to see a clip of that debate.
Here's the clip of Kwaku L from last night's debate.
We know that God the Father is an embodied physical person. For him to be immaterial would make him essentially nothingness. We know from the Doctrine and Covenants, scripture given to Joseph Smith for the entire world, that all spirit is a form of matter. If not, wouldn't exist. For example, I want to quote an early apostle of the Latter-day Saint Church, Parley P. Pratt. He said this: "Nothing exists which is not material. The elementary principles of the material universe are eternal. They never originated from nullity, and they can never be annihilated. Immateriality is but another name for nullity. It is the negative of all things and beings, of all existence. There is not one particle of proof to be advanced to establish its existence. It has no way to manifest itself to any intelligence in heaven or on earth. Neither God, angels, or men could possibly conceive of such a substance, being, or thing. It possesses no property or power by which to make itself manifest to any intelligent being in the universe. Reason and analogy never scan of it or even conceive of it. Revelation never reveals it, nor do any of our senses witness its existence. It cannot be seen, felt, heard, tasted, or smelled even by the strongest organs, or the most acute sensibilities. It is neither liquid or solid, soft or hard, abstract. In short, it can exert influence ever. It can neither be act or be acted upon. And if it doesn't, it is of no possible use. It possesses not one desirable property, faculty, or use."
So Mormons are materialists, and I actually wasn't aware of this until I watched Trinity Radio's video. This does have a few interesting implications in regards to God's existence. Let's hear Trinity Radio's response.
Pritchett, is it true that only the material exists?
No. Why would I don't even, this is okay. So in the history of philosophy and theology, and those are, in the West kind of tied together, there's been a lot of, confusion brought about by the words like substance, for example, right? But you can talk about something without it being physical or, like an object or something. This has never been a cause of confusion until people stopped reading. So I don't know why you would assume that if something is immaterial, that is the equivalent of it not being a thing.
So I think what Pritchett actually says here really is not a point. Although I do excuse him for it, this was a live stream and it was off the cuff. He was very non-specific with his description of you can talk about something without it being physical, like an object or something. But let me describe something non-physical. The sorting hat is very old and patched. When placed on the head of a new student at Hogwarts, a mouth forms at the brim. It then states which house the new student belongs to. So I just spoke of something non-physical. Notice how it also doesn't exist. Now, when I first watched this clip, I thought Pritchett meant that historically philosophers believed immaterial things exist.
In the history of philosophy and theology. This has never been a cause of confusion until people stopped reading.
I don't think that's what he meant. But it is a good jumping off point for explaining my definition of materialism. Suppose you were to go back more than 2,000 years and ask someone, do non-physical things exist? I imagine their answer would be yes. But then if you were to ask them for examples, I reckon you'd be given answers like the wind or light. Things which nowadays, well, are they physical? It really depends how you define what a material or physical thing is. If you define material or physical as made up of the same stuff that we are, then yes, the wind is physical, since it is made up of the same stuff we are, just a lot less dense. Light, however, is composed of photons, which from a physics standpoint are bosons, whereas the atoms we're made of are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons, which are ultimately fermions. So what we need is a definition for something physical or material, something that includes the stuff we're made of, as well as things that have already been discovered, such as light and gravitational waves, and things that have yet to be discovered. For example, say, dark matter and dark energy. But we need to exclude other things, such as, say, God, ghosts, and things which we don't consider to be physical or material, but also without outright stating they don't exist. So the definition for materialism that I give is the belief that only physical things exist, and physical things are anything that operates via physical rules. I think most theists would agree to this definition of physical, since most theists agree that God operates outside of any physical laws, that he is not constrained by physical laws. But what does it mean to operate outside of any physical laws? Not just the physical laws of this reality, but any physical laws. Well, the physical laws are descriptive, and what we are describing is consistencies in reality. These are things which remain the same no matter the situation. So if you want to say something is non-physical, you're saying there are no rules by which it operates, that there are no consistencies to it. So let's suppose something exists, but it has no consistency whatsoever. How do you know it didn't just stop existing right now? If it has no consistency, there's nothing to stop that from happening.
I don't know why you would assume that if something is immaterial, that is the equivalent of it not being a thing.
So, Braxton and Pritchett, if you happen to watch this, then I hope that helps you understand why people say non-physical things don't exist.
Now, what do we need to say about this? First of all, mind must precede matter.
Mind must precede matter. That is a definitive statement, so does he give any evidence or reasoning to support it?
Mind must precede matter. You know, if you listen to the spokespersons for Mormonism throughout its history, you will find some very uncomfortable statements. And even on fairmormon.org, which is an apologetics site for Mormons, you'll find that they have a real hard problem with this idea that this Father God was once a man, and then there was one before that, and one before that, and one before that.
No. So I'm just gonna say Hitchens' razor. Maybe Braxton gives some evidence or reasoning in a previous video, but I'm not trawling through all of Trinity Radio's old videos to find this.
That's an infinite regression of fathers, which is impossible. If you want to know how to handle that, and this is really handy that if you're familiar with the defenses of the Kalam cosmological argument, like that, the second premise of it, that the universe began to exist, that when someone says, well, maybe it's past infinite, it can't be past infinite. You can't have a past infinite series of causal events because you'd never arrive at today.
So Braxton thinks that an infinite regression is impossible. And I think what his reasoning is that if something happened an infinite amount of time ago in the past, then we would never arrive at today.
It can't be past infinite. You can't have a past infinite series of causal events because you'd never arrive at today.
But saying the past is infinite It's not the same as saying something happened an infinite amount of time ago. I agree that that is impossible. And I know Braxton understands this because he explains the same reasoning but going forwards in time in another video. So the video he mentions this is his response to Rationality Rules' response to William Lane Craig's response on Capturing Christianity's channel, responding to a video with supposedly the best arguments for atheism. It's quite a mouthful. In Braxton's response, he says that it's important to note that when you're sent to hell, you'll never receive an infinite punishment, because you will never be there for an infinity amount of time. As you're sitting there in the flames, well, yeah, time is going to be passing, but an infinite amount of time will never have passed, so you'll never receive an infinite punishment. Now, I agree there is no point in the future which is infinitely far away from now. Pick any arbitrary point in the future, and there is always a finite amount of time between then and now. But there's always a moment after that, and a moment after that, and so on. But notice how, in saying there is no point in the future which is infinitely in the future, is not the same as saying that time must end. Yet when Braxton says that, well, there's no point infinitely far in the past, that must mean time begins, that doesn't follow. Pick any arbitrary point in the past, and there will always be a finite amount of time between then and now. But there'll always be a moment before that, and before that, and before that, and so on. I think this comes from mistaking infinity for a value. When applying this to the future, Braxton recognizes that infinity isn't a value. Infinity means you will never reach it. But when applying it to the past, he asks if there's an infinite point in the past. And, well, no, there isn't, because, again, infinity is a description, not a value. Currently, Rationality Rules and Capturing Christianity are having a debate on the Kalam cosmological argument, and one of the points of contention is whether a past regression is impossible or not. So I recommend you watch that. Is mentioning other channels really going to have an impact on my first video?
This idea that if you can't touch it, this is what Kwaku, I hope, put out there, and what a lot of atheists put out there is, well, wait a minute. You can't touch it. You can't smell it. You can't see it. You can't feel it. How do you know? You can't hear it, audibly, although some people think they can. How do you, this thing doesn't exist. You're describing something that doesn't exist.
Now that I've explained materialism in a clearer way, what is really meant by non-physical things not being able to exist, you can understand what Kwaku meant a little better when he said that something non-physical can't interact with anything. Because, well, interactions are described with physical laws. How could something non-physical interact with anything if there's no consistency to it?
And we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.